Hi everybody. So I have this all white still life painting that I started yesterday, and it was intended to be a study of all the different varieties of color that actually appear in an object that's completely white. I've been looking at this over the last day since I painted it, and I realized that I kind of want to take it a bit farther. And also, I am noticing some things that I feel like don't work that well, and I really want to go back in and fix those. So I thought it might just be helpful for all of you to see how I would go about taking something like this farther. So yeah, that's what I'll be doing today in this video. So I just have all the same tools as yesterday. Additionally, I have a little squirrel on the windowsill who's eating birdseed. Can you see the squirrel? He's not supposed to because it's supposed to be for the birds, but maybe he'll help with the painting process. Anyway, I'm using all the same paints and materials as yesterday. So I have my white, my cadmium yellow medium, cadmium red light, and cerulean blue for my blue. And my palette knife here, my Gamsol in my jar, my linseed oil mixture in here, all my brushes. And of course, my paper towels. So if you're doing something like this, the first thing is to get your painting to this stage where you have all the general big areas of color in. And today I'm going to be working with a little more detail, trying to get more subtleties, but it's so important that you don't move to that stage until you have really grappled with the entire composition at this level and gotten it resolved. So my first step is actually going to be to just, at this level of detail and resolution, try to push the painting a little bit farther. And something else I wanted to share with you is I've been reading this book, Hawthorne on Painting, which is just the thoughts and sort of class notes of this painter, Charles Hawthorne. I think the book is from the 1930s, and it was published after he died, so it's that era. But he actually talks about all white paintings, or the importance of white in paintings, and just in general, I really recommend this book because it's all about the importance of color and just finding the right big areas of color to go next to each other. And it's sort of like, if you can get the colors right, then everything else in the painting will follow from that. So I wanted to read you two little things from this. One is, Hawthorne says, "There is nothing in the world so helpful to a young painter as a study of white, if he will be but honest." So, obviously, painting something that's just white is so interesting and helpful to all you young painters out there. If he will but be honest, I think what Hawthorne is referring to in that is, as I'm painting this, it's really tempting to just, take my white paint and put it everywhere, or, I see this shadow and it looks really dark on here right now, so it's really tempting to just go in and lighten it, because we know that area is really a white object. But you have to really be true to what your eyes are seeing and trust that and put it down just as you're seeing it. Another section in this book, which is about the importance of color and just getting these big shapes of color right, is here. He says, search always for more beautiful notes of color. Don't search to put more things in. Study larger spots of color coming together. Don't break objects up into many colors. Establish big general things. You can't make all the differences you see. Insist all the time on one spot being right relatively to another. I'm trying to say that when you think straight, that thought alone is worthwhile. And when you put down one or two notes that are right, that is all that is necessary. You'd be surprised at how little work it takes to make a picture. So, that's the inspiration for today. This idea that we can't possibly put everything into the painting, and we wouldn't want to. That is everything that we see in actual real life. There's an infinite amount of detail. So we have to decide, kind of the challenge is like how little can you put in and capture the important things about what you're seeing. So to get started here, the first thing that I did before I started recording this was I went through and I remixed all of the colors that went into this original study. So you can see there are 7 shades of color here, and that's kind of my full range of the colors that went into this. So from over here, this is the color that I used for the brightest highlights, and it was just white and a little bit of yellow. Then my next lightest is the color that went here and here. The next lightest was here, etc. I actually didn't mix this darkest color that I put in here and here. And that was because as I was standing back from this study, I realized that I think that color was too dark. And I want to go back and change that color to make it a little bit lighter so that it fits in. Because right now I think it's kind of breaking up the harmony of everything else. So I'm going to look for the color that should go there first. And now that I have all the other colors here, I can use those to kind of calibrate what I want for that. So the darkest color I can get with this palette, and with any palette of primary colors, this will be the case, is if I just take red and blue and mix them together. Okay, and as I did that, my red just completely took over, so I need a lot more blue. And when you're mixing, it's really, you can't really say like, oh, I need 2/3 the amount of red that I need of the blue or something. It's just all visual. So you just look, if it's too red, you add more blue. If it's too blue, you add more red. So that's pretty close to the color that I had there initially. And I want to lighten it. I think one way I can do this is, so that color on the still life setup, I find it around the rim of the ramekin here, inside there, a little bit back here. So I can compare that darkest color, just looking at the setup, to the other colors that are around it. I think it's probably the closest to this color here, which was like the darkest shadow color here. So maybe I'll take a little bit of that color and mix it with this darkest color that I just mixed and see if I can just get something kind of in between. So I think in terms of value, that's not bad. It looks, yeah, pretty good in terms of like how dark it is compared to the shadow that's next to it, but it looks a little too purple to me when I hold it up here. So I'm going to try adding a little bit of yellow to cancel out the purple. Let's see what that does. That definitely made it a little more kind of a neutral color. I think it's pretty good. I might just add a little blue because I see some kind of bluish tones glowing in those areas. I'm going to try to put that in. And for this now, I'm using a smaller brush than I used yesterday. So this is a 1. It's still a Filbert bristle brush. What do I think of that so far? I'll put in a little more. I'm not sure if it's still too dark, but right now I'm getting this like shadow on the wall there. Yeah, what do I think of that? I think that color is there, but maybe not so much of a dark area here. Like when I look at this, it's just like a tiny little edge that has that level of dark, and then it actually gets brighter as it sort of turns around the lip of the object. So I think next I want to find a color that's going to go right along that edge, sort of like the transition color. I'll put this one here to save it. So it might be pretty similar to maybe this one. Because I see it as a bit like orangey, so not blue like the shadow, but orangey like the light, but I think a bit darker than this one here, which was this color that I had on the wall back here, I think. Actually, I'll try just putting that color in and let's see if it works. So yeah, you can always just, if you're not sure if a color is going to be right or not, just try putting it in, and you can always paint right on top of it if it doesn't end up working. Do you think that's working? I think it might be. And because right now my entire painting is super, super wet, like nothing, I only painted the first layer yesterday, so nothing has had time to dry pretty much at all. So what that means is I'm having to get a lot of paint just sort of like globbed onto the end of the brush here and just putting it on top of the surface of the painting. Because if I try to like put it on thinly or spread it around or anything, it's just immediately gonna mix with what's underneath, and that will mess up like all these beautiful colors that I've calibrated so precisely and painstakingly, so don't want to do that. Yeah, I actually really like that color for the rim going around, and I think I might continue it even a bit farther. Yeah, and I think that's nice because it shows, right here where I just have this one color against the background color, it's a really sharp transition and it makes it look kind of cut out. But if I put this color for the rim along there, it makes a really nice transition between the bright color of the object and the color of the background, so it feels more like it's curving back away from us. So yeah, overall here, the way I'm kind of thinking about it is I'm not trying to be precise or detailed about any of the drawing that I'm doing here. Yeah, or like, trying to put a lot of information in, but I am being very precise and punctilious about getting the colors exactly right and kind of in the right spot. So it's like you don't have to draw perfectly, and if you can just get the right color in the right spot, then like drawing doesn't really matter that much. It kind of takes care of itself at that point. Yeah, but so that's that going around. I'm debating whether to continue it around even farther, but I think, and the sunlight just came out, so it's kind of messing up what I'm seeing there again. I think maybe I'll continue it a little bit farther, but I think we do get some more direct light on this rim of the object. So it doesn't need to be as dark there. Okay, so I just changed the lighting so that the sunlight can't really shine on my still life anymore. It changed things a little bit, and I think it made it a bit harder to see the actual lighting on here on the video, which is annoying, but I'm just going to keep going on this, and hopefully things will still make sense, even though you might not be able to see like the same colors on here as I'm seeing with my actual eyes. Yeah, and this brings us back to like one of the main purposes of painting, in my opinion, which is to actually document what our eyes are seeing, which is very different from what a camera picks up. So yeah, it's not ideal, but keep that in mind as I go forward with this. So I'm pretty happy with how this is working overall, but there are some things that are still bothering me a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of address them in the order of importance, or like the order of how much they're bugging me right now. So one of those things is, I think this shadow here could still be a bit lighter. Like when I look at the edge of the shadow on the object, it kind of curves down toward the base here, and when it's like at the top, I can't really even see where the transition is between the shadow and the light area, and then as it gets closer to the bottom, there's a pretty sharp line of the shadow. So I think that would be a fun and interesting thing to try to capture. Another thing that I'm going to address is a little more of showing the texture in this area on the ramekin. Yeah, I think even in the video you can see like over here you don't see much in terms of texture, over here you don't see much in terms of texture, but right here you do get a sense of what's going on. Another thing that's bothering me is, this is just a drawing thing, but the edge here I think should go more straight down. I think it's pretty interesting that the edge in my painting is kind of like blending into the shadow a little bit. I think that's kind of accurate to how I'm seeing it there, but I do want to make sure that it's more of a straight, almost vertical. And then the last thing that I definitely want to address is there's this little piece of shadow that is on like the back wall, and then that joins together with the shadow on the ground. So I want to just make sure that those are matching up. So I think I'll start with this one and with looking for maybe a lighter version of the shadow to go right in here so that I can make that more gradual transition into the light. So the color of the shadow I had there is this one. I think I'm going to lighten it a little bit more. And maybe I can do that if I just take a little of that color, and then this color here I think was this one. Maybe I'll try just mixing them together and see if I can get something that's halfway between the two. That might work actually. I'm going to try putting it in. And I also am seeing this shape as more of like that kind of a curved thing going down right now. Yeah, definitely like that color better. I also see it up here. And I think it's nice because just having like this dark shadow here, this lighter shadow here, and the lighter shadow here shows a little bit of the lip of the ramekin there. Yeah, and the only spot I really see it blending is like right here under the lip. So there, I'm gonna try like rubbing the paint a little bit to make that spot blend. So mostly I'm not blending anything together on the surface of the painting, but maybe there are a few spots where I really just want sort of to not know where the edge is. I can even like use my finger a little bit or something. Yeah, and then as it goes down, it gets, yeah, we get more of a solid line. Maybe I'll make it even a little sharper. And even in here too, it's mainly dark right at the edge of the rim, so just lightening in here a little bit. Yeah, I'm still wondering if I should make this darkest color a little bit lighter. Maybe I'll try it. I'm gonna try mixing a little of this with a little of this. A little more. Tiny bit of yellow. What do we think of that? Yeah, I think maybe that's a better color for the darkest shadow. I'm gonna try putting that in here a little bit too. What do we think? Maybe a tiny bit light for right there. So yeah, mainly just playing with that shadow a little bit. The biggest danger at this point is, we have our nice, strong shapes of light and shadow, really carefully mixed colors for those areas. The biggest danger is that we lose that overall sense of how everything is fitting together. Like as we're going in to do smaller details and like more precise things, there's a real danger of losing the overall sense of how everything's fitting together. So like as I'm looking in this shadow area, I start to see like there's a lighter moment here, there's a lighter moment here, and I might be tempted to start just lightening things a lot more in the shadow, like going lighter and lighter. And what can happen if you do that is you end up with areas of the shadow that are as light as the areas where the actual light is hitting on the object. And then you'll just lose your whole overall sense of where the lights and shadows are. So for everything you do at this stage, try to still be in the mindset of like the big picture, the overall setup, and never let yourself get away from that. Alright, so I think I'm going to leave that shadow alone now because I'm endangering it right now by going too far. And I'm going to look at a bit of the texture in this area. Mainly what I see are stripes of light and shadow along these, along the texture, the ridges of this area. And I started to put those in before, but I think I can be a little more precise about them. Clean off one of my brushes for this. And I'm going to be precise, but I'm not really going to be introducing any new colors. So I'm going to try with the colors I have to get the sense of that. So this is the color that I had right here. And I think if I can just put that color in the right places and then also put the shadow color in the right places, I can get enough of a sense of what's going on just with that. And I also get the texture at the top. So a little bit there. Something like that. Yeah, it's really interesting to look at this area of transition between the light and shadow. I think I'm going to play with that a little bit more. So up to here, we don't really see any texture. Then we get our first little highlight there. And each one gets a little bit bigger as it goes around, as it kind of like turns towards the light. Bring in a bit more of my brightest highlight color that was up here. So bringing in a little of that lighter color to show the highlight on that ridge there. And at this point, maybe I go for an even tinier brush. So this is the first sable brush I've used. It's rubbed off, but this is a Winsor & Newton brush. Yeah, so that kind of thing, I think that's showing the highlights on the ridges pretty nicely. Maybe I'll do another one over here. I don't know if that was too much. Might have been too much. Let's see. I'll live with it for a little and see how I feel. This is the lighter shadow color. I might put a little more of that in between these. So here. So as soon as the two colors start mixing with each other on the canvas, that's when I stop, get more paint on the brush, and keep going. And then I'm debating about how to put this in, but there's like a reflected light here that shows where the bottom of the lip is. Actually, maybe I can show it partly with the shadow that goes along here. Like that kind of thing. Like this one's a little overstated. Okay. I'm gonna try putting in maybe this color, a little bit of a lighter shadow color along where that reflected light is. Show up. I guess I have to go a little bit lighter. I'm like being really cautious about this because this is one of those moments where it could start to look like there's light hitting that spot rather than it being in the shadow, but with just some light reflecting up into it. I have to go lighter than that to make it visible. Maybe if I go yellow rather than white. Let's see if that works. Hi everybody. You probably couldn't even tell that I was gone before, but I just ran into a bunch of difficulties with filming this. But now I'm back and I'm really excited to polish off this little study here. So I was just working on this area, and I think before the camera turned itself off, I had just painted over the highlight that was on the rim of the ramekin right here. So I think I just want to put that back in. I'm going to use a pretty small brush and this highlight color, and I just want to get it really in the right place. Yeah, and now I want to move on to another area. So I think I'm going to look at the drawing a little bit in this area and also getting this shadow that's being cast, getting the shape of that right and the color. So first I just want to straighten out this line here. What was my color for that? It was this. think that's a little better. Okay, something like that. And then also I'm noticing there's a lighter area inside the shadow right here. Like I like the color I have for the shadow here, but I want to find a lighter tone for it to go in there. So I think this was my original shadow color for that area. And as it gets lighter, I think it gets a little yellower. I'm going to try just adding a little bit of yellow to it. Okay, that color looks good. I need a little white to actually lighten it more. Again, being pretty cautious with the white. And something I'm looking at is, I know I want this color to be lighter than the shadow that's right here. It's also a little bit lighter than the edge of the ramekin that's right here. So we need to get that balance to work. But also significantly darker than the actual light area on the ground there. Okay. That looks better in terms of value, but it still needs to be a little yellower. It's almost there. Let's try that color. Yeah, I think that color is good. It still looks like it's part of the shadow, but it makes the shadow feel a little more translucent, I guess. And there's kind of a rule about shadows, which you might observe if you're doing your painting like this, which is that the closer the shadow is to the thing that's casting it, it's darker in those spots, and then the farther away it gets a little more light in it. So right in the front here is where the shadow is darkest, and then as it goes farther away, it gets a little lighter, and yeah, also the color changes a little bit. Yeah, and now I also want to resolve whatever is happening right here, because this is supposed to be part of the shadow, but it's not exactly joining up right. So where's my color for that? It's not this. Maybe I'll change the edge of the shadow a little bit. Like that. Okay, at least that's starting to join up. I have some little birds keeping me company on the windowsill today. Try to show them to you when we come back. Okay, I think I'm happier with that shadow, and it looks like it's actually functioning in the way it's supposed to now. Another thing I'm noticing is one spot where I see the actual texture on the ramekin is also right down here. I can see a little bit of shadowy lines going up into the texture from this shadow on the bottom. So I'm going to try to bring that out a little bit. This reminds me a little of painting teeth in a portrait. I don't know if you guys have tried, but if you're ever painting someone who's smiling, it's really hard to know kind of how to indicate the teeth without having it look too just like toothy, basically. It starts to look a little monstrous if you put them in with too much detail. So what I tend to do is I'll put in like a big light shape for the teeth, and then basically with like the shapes of the gums around them show where the teeth like start and stop and where there are the little gaps between the teeth. And a lot of the time that's enough to make us really understand what's going on. Not too much? That might have been too much. Yeah, so I don't want to make this too toothy either. Yeah, so another thing I want to do is just make sure that the line of the background is lining up on both sides. It's not that important, but it's bothering me a little bit, so I'm going to take that color and bring this up a little bit. Another quick drawing thing, I think the lip of this should be a little bit narrower. And I can make it look a little more like rounded and open if I maybe I've been a little too dark. Yeah, I think that helped. And also on the other side too, I just want to show bring this up a little bit like that. Yeah, and then a tiny bit of shadow underneath there. I'm sort of encroaching on the territory that I was working on before here, but I think this shadow that goes across like that is pretty important. I don't know if I like that better or not, but I'll live with it for now. And then, I don't know if you can see this in the image here, but there are these little lights that are reflecting from the ridges on the ramekin onto the ground right here. I want to see if I can get those in just because I think they're kind of cool. It might be too much, but I'm just going to try it. Yeah, so that kind of thing. I kind of like it. I think I also want to work on the base of the shadow here. There's, yeah, I think the shadow here can be a little narrower and more specifically describe the edge of the object there. First, I'm going to just fix this a little bit. Something like that, and then just kind of closer. And then it goes straight out. Until about there, and then it starts to be more rounded. I don't know if that helped or not, but I'll work with it for a little and see if I can get it to. Maybe it needs a little bit more. Here. That kind of thing. We'll go with it for now. Let's see, what else does this need? I think I might just try narrowing those highlights a little bit. Maybe also be a little straighter there. Okay. I like that. That'll make it look sharper. Yeah, so there might not be that much else that I need to do. Whenever I get to the point with a painting where I'm just sort of like looking for things to change, and then when I do them, they're not really helping that much. A lot of the time, that's an indication that it's actually time to stop. I'm tempted to keep going, but I'm just curious if I put a little bit more of this. Yeah, I don't know if that really added anything. So yeah, so I think I'm at the point where I basically just need to leave it alone, maybe live with it for a few days. There might be something I notice in that time that I want to go back and adjust, but overall, I think I'm pretty much there. Uh, yeah, so I really hope that you'll try this exercise of doing an all white still life painting. The first time I did a painting of like an all white setup, it actually like really changed my life because suddenly I started seeing like how many colors there were in this, setup that doesn't actually have any color. And it's really cool. It's one of those things where when you first think about it, it sounds really boring and easy, and it's completely the opposite of both of those things. So yeah, just make sure that you give yourself ample time to work on something like this. I think probably overall, if I take out the technical difficulties I was having with my computer, this probably would have taken about 2 hours. So like 1 hour for the preliminary blocking in the color, and then another hour for refining and adjusting and changing things. So if it's the first one you've done, probably plan for like maybe like 2 hours for the first the first step where you're just mixing all the colors, and see if you can without focusing on detail at all, just get that really, really solid. And then, and then maybe like let it sit for a little bit and then come back and start adding in the details. But yeah, don't skip the first step and be drawn into like the fun part, which is adding the details, because it all depends on getting the first initial blocking in really, really solid. So I really hope you have fun with this. And we'll see if I can get some of my birds to come back to show you. But happy painting!